they kind of just hand wave away everything that they did previously in their life because, well, that was their old life. That's not who they are now. And I'm sorry, but just because a character or a person transitions from one gender to the other, that doesn't suddenly just wipe away possibly all the horrible things that they did originally. That to me is a really warped way of thinking because, not to spoil it, but I will spoil it because frankly, I don't really care. But like the movie kind of wraps up in a way where they celebrate Emilia Pérez and the things that she was fighting for and championing and how, she chose to live a life of freedom, even though they've just done despicable, horrible things through the majority of their life. It's like, oh, that doesn't matter now because they're no longer that person. I'm sorry, but that is not true, and that's ridiculous. Hey everybody, hope everyone's 2025 is going well so far. As you know, I saw a lot of movies in 2024. Recently did my top 10 best and top 10 worst movies of the previous year, but it's impossible to see everything within a single year, even though I've certainly saw a lot of movies. But I've been doing a lot of catch-up recently. I was able to see some great movies last week. Stuff like Strange Darling, Hundreds of Beavers, and Nora, 3 films I highly recommend. But of course, there's still a ton of other movies out there right now that are getting a lot of attention, a lot of awards attention. And, I want to continue to, catch up on these 2024 films. And, the last night, the previous night, whenever the hell you're watching this, some time ago, the Golden Globes happened. And a bunch of, movies were nominated, a bunch of movies lost, and some won. And one film in particular won pretty big at the Golden Globes, and that was Emilia Pérez, this new Netflix film, a film that I knew basically nothing about, but the movie, it went on to win Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. It also won Best Foreign Film, Best Supporting Actress for Zoe Saldana, who I guess forgot how to speak. It was trouble, I guess, making speeches, even though she's a professional actress, so that's kind of weird. And I guess it also won Best Original Song. So, I figured it just made sense to review this film next out of the movies that I still want to eventually check out, since it ended up winning so many awards. However, I've come to learn that the film is extremely divisive. I've seen it pop up on best of and worst of lists over the last couple weeks. So again, I was just very intrigued to check it out for myself and see where I would fall on it. Would I love it like some people do, or would I downright despise it? But before I go ahead and jump into the nitty-gritty details of this film and share my overall opinion on it, I do want to provide you a bit of a synopsis. The movie follows this lawyer who feels very underappreciated. She's a woman in a man's world, and she's looked down upon, even though she's very, intelligent and articulate. However, she ends up being contacted by a mysterious stranger who turns out to be a cartel boss who later kidnaps her and asks her for a favor. This cartel boss wishes to transition from a man to a woman and wants to send this lawyer, again played by Zoe Saldana, around the world to interview various doctors and things and physicians to help with this transition process. The cartel boss abandons their family and is able to then transition. However, years later, things get a little crazy and hijinks ensue. First of all, this movie has a ton of production companies behind it. Like the first 10 minutes, the credits are so long in this film because they just announced one movie house after the other. It kind of got a little ridiculous. Actually, it didn't kind of get it. It was ridiculous. It was laugh out loud funny. And then, the rest of the movie happened. Emilia Pérez is an absolutely wretched film. I'm very much on the side of the people who are saying this movie is terrible because it is for a variety of reasons. First of all, this movie is barely a musical. The singing is more talking singing. And they even make notable singers even sound bad in the film. People whose professions originally were singers and songwriters and things. They do this. They just kind of sing what they're doing and their various actions. Like one of the first songs that we see is Zoe Saldana, or that we hear is just Zoe Saldana trying to, type up this, speech that she's got to give to her boss because they're trying to offend this other, cartel mob boss. And it's just her like talking, singing her various frustrations. And it just doesn't have any pop to it. It's you can't hum it. You certainly can't sing it. There's just not a lot of oomph behind any of the songs throughout this entire movie. They're just, I mean, to be perfectly honest, they're downright awful throughout the film. And so it just surprises me that this movie is winning so big at all these award shows for supposedly being the best musical of the year, like in competition with some other like great musicals like Wicked or dark comedies like Nora. It's just utterly bizarre. But the music throughout this entire film is awful. And there's not a single song that stood out to me watching it. Also, the characters across the board are severely underwritten in this movie. They're just all surface level. Like Zoe Saldana's character, she's just, this lawyer that's put upon. She's frustrated, she's tired, and that's really all you learn about her throughout the entirety of this movie, which takes place over the course of several years, like 4 or 5 years. That's really it. There's also a really funny gag where she's doing like one of her talking singing songs, which is terrible, and she's complaining about that her ass is getting too fat. I'm just like, girl, I'm gonna tell you right now, you don't have to worry about that. Her ass is not fat whatsoever. I feel like it's not very thick. I feel like a stiff breeze would knock Zoe Saldana over, to be perfectly honest. But I just found her performance to be completely lackluster in the film. And then you have Selena Gomez, which she's getting a lot of awards attention right now for this movie. She plays the wife, the paramour of the cartel mob boss, and it's Madam Jessie. And she's like this U.S. raised wife, then eventually went down to Mexico. And you could tell because her Spanish does not sound great. She is, even I noticed, I'm like, you have a very thick English accent, very thick American accent when speaking in Spanish. But I have heard, Selena Gomez sing before. I know some people like her, some people don't, but I've heard her stuff. I'm like, yeah, she sounds pretty good. She sounds decent, right? They make her sound terrible in this movie. Like the big songs that she gets are incredibly awkward and weird and very off-putting in the film. And then the last character I want to bring up before we get more of the technical aspects of the film and some of my biggest issues with this movie overall. But you also have Carla Sofia Gascon, who plays Emilia Pérez, originally Juan Del Monte, who is the cartel kingpin, who eventually undergoes, gender confirming surgery and transitioning and things. And it's a performance that I kind of think is laughable, honestly, because they also sing in this movie, and their singing is atrocious. It's more like this. It's more like, I don't want to be a man, I want to be a woman, and now I am sad. And that's like the level of singing that they give in this movie. And then just kind of like later on, like a major plot point, because eventually the character, which abandons their family, gives them a bunch of money, but, I want to be Emilia Pérez, I want to go off on my own. They eventually start missing their wife and children, and they make up this whole crazy-ass story like, oh, yeah, even though the husband's gone, the husband's dead, he actually had a long-lost aunt that wants you to come back to Mexico City and live with them, because, she loves you just so much. And then it kind of becomes like a demented, twisted version of Mrs. Doubtfire. And I'm sure the filmmakers didn't intend for that to happen, or maybe they did, but it becomes comical. It just becomes really unintentionally funny at times. But in terms of the technical aspects, across the board, they're all just really, really poor to me. Like, the lighting is very flat. Like, nothing pops. The choreography, like the dance choreography, it's lackluster across the board. And just everything overall just feels so dull and washed out, from the technical aspects to the characters, to the story itself. Just nothing stands out. And the art direction just feels non-existent. It isn't there. Also, I probably should have said this at the top. despite this being set in Mexico, this isn't actually a Mexican film. Emilia Perez is a French movie, directed by Jacques Audiard. I think that's how you say their name. Honestly, I don't really care. I mean, this movie has gotten a lot of it's been surrounded a lot of controversy because the director has pretty much admitted and like proudly that they did very little research about Mexico, about Mexican culture, about cartels, and how these horrific criminals have affected so many lives in Mexico. I mean, literally, and even outside of that, which is incredibly troubling, which I want to get more into that in just a bit. But like literally the first thing out after the 10 minutes of producer credits in this film is literally a glowing Mexican band or mariachi band, literally a glowing mariachi band just coming right towards the camera, like strumming on their instruments. I'm just like, I think there's more to Mexico outside of like mariachi bands and like the cartels. You know, that's just me saying that, but it's just really, really bizarre. But I guess the thing that bothers me the most about this movie is how it just glorifies the cartel and brushes away their crimes. Because like the drug cartel boss in this movie, like they established, like this is a really bad person who has done horrible things. I mean, the movie starts out with Zoe Saldana being creepily called by this person, kidnapped, dragged to their commune out in the middle of the desert, and forced to find all these, you know, doctors and medical practitioners which would help with this transition surgery, which I'm like, okay, already pretty disturbing. But then eventually, like throughout the film, after like the main character, after the character, the cartel boss is transitions, they kind of just hand wave away everything that they did previously in their life because, well, that was their old life. That's not who they are now. And I'm sorry, but just because a character or a person transitions from one gender to the other, that doesn't suddenly just wipe away possibly all the horrible things that they did originally. That to me is a really warped way of thinking because, not to spoil it, but I will spoil it because frankly, I don't really care. But like the movie kind of wraps up in a way where they celebrate Emilia Perez and the things that she was fighting for and championing, and how, you know, she chose to live a life of freedom, even though they've just done despicable, horrible things through the majority of their life. It's like, oh, that doesn't matter now because they're no longer that person. I'm sorry, but that is not true, and that's ridiculous. And I'd be very curious to know what do Mexicans, you know, what do other Latin American people think about this, and just kind of that statement and waving away the crimes and the horrific things that this cartel person did, like people who have been affected, you know, by those horrible, evil organizations. It's just a really warped, poorly conceived of a fairy tale with no magic in it whatsoever. There's just no creativeness. It just, everything across the board is dull and lackluster. The songs are completely uninspired. There's no art direction to speak of. Everything is just kind of dull and gray. And I think at the heart of it, it just has this really troubling message that people, I think, should look at pretty hard and dissect and realize that this movie is rotten to the core, in my opinion. It's a very troubling film. And also, I'd be curious to hear the LGBTQ, their opinions on this part of the people in that community, the trans people in that community. What do they feel about a movie like this? But yeah, overall, yeah, Emilia Perez is an absolutely wretched film. One of the worst movies of the year, certainly one of the worst musicals I've seen in 2024, and I feel like the reason why this movie is getting as much attention, as much award attention is for sociopolitical reasons, but those people that are awarding it for those sociopolitical reasons aren't actually looking at the story, what the film is actually saying, or just like, but it appears to not even realize what it's saying. So yeah, I really despise this movie, but I'm very curious to hear other people's opinions on this film. Did you love Emilia Perez? You know, were you more mixed on, or did you downright hate it like I did? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.